Hello, BookTube. It's time for a little more TBR torture. I know you're still gasping for breath and calling your lawyers about the last time, but I don't care. I can torture your TBR all I want. And I've got, what have I got here? 6 books to show you, 2 of which I have read. I'll end with the 2 that I have already read. So we'll talk first about the 4 that I haven't read. And boy, oh boy, BookTube. The first 2 books that I haven't read really make me wish, you know how I always say, I'm always complaining, that I wish we could somehow snap our fingers and have access to each other. I wish that I could go and visit, or better yet, have you visit me easily with like a Star Trek transporter instead of the insuperable distance between us all. Now, I know that because I'm old and I have smallpox scars from 1782 and I kind of smell, I know that most of you don't wish that. I'm perfectly happy that that is not possible. Nevertheless, I wish I could snap my fingers and have booktubers here every night to talk books. And you know, these first 2 books, I wish that it was Juan from Just Juan Reader. I wish he could suddenly make his way to Boston, because I could use his expertise in both of these books. They're right in his wheelhouse, and they're not in mine. But they're both April books, and I need to get to both of them because they're starting to get buzz. Both of them are. The first one is something you may have seen on other BookTube channels. It's by Lori Gottlieb, and it's Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And the subtitle is A Therapist, Her Therapist, and Our Lives Revealed. And it's, let's see here. Let me read you a bit about the pub sheet here. Have you ever wondered what's actually going on for your therapist? While pouring out your heart, dissecting your feelings, have you ever thought that maybe your therapist's life is falling apart too? I seem to remember, maybe I learned it from Juan's channel, that if a therapist's life is falling apart, that either A, they are ethically obliged not to have patients during the worst of that time, or that B, at the very least, they're ethically obliged to say nothing about it. They're there for the patient, not the patient for them. I could be wrong about both of those, but Juan would know. He should be the one reviewing this. Every year, nearly 30 million Americans sit on a therapist's couch. That's incredible. That's amazing. That's 10% of the population. And some of those patients are therapists. In her warm, wise, and boldly revealing new book, therapist Lori Gottlieb tells us her most significant credential is not her license or rigorous training, but the fact that she's, quote, a card-carrying member of the human race. In what writer Suzanne Callahan praises as the most relatable portrait of a therapist I've ever encountered, Lori welcomes us into her world with disarming candor, just as a crisis catapults her into the office of a quirky psychologist named Wendell. And this comes out in April, and it goes hand in hand with the next book that I want to show you. The next bit of TBR torture. This thing's getting lots and lots of praise. Not that that means anything, but it means one thing anyway. It doesn't speak anything to the quality of the book, but it means I have to pay attention to it. Because it's my wheelhouse is new American books. That is my concentration when it comes to the reading world. I can't say, well, I can't look at a book like this and say, well, I don't particularly like memoirs by young people who haven't done anything, and I'm not all that big a fan of psychotherapy, so I can safely ignore the book. No. That's what a closed mind does. No. Therapy does a lot of good for a lot of people, whether I think regardless of what I think about it. And this is starting to get buzzed all around, so I have to read it, and I'm gonna want to review it, but I wish that I could sit down over wine and calzones with Juan and talk out what it is. And the same thing 10 times over for this next one. This is by Anne Harrington, and it is MindFixers, Psychiatry's Troubled Search for the Biology of Mental Illness. See, you have the straight lines, but they start to warp. Very minimal cover, but a very intriguing design. This also comes out in late April. Let's see. Behind our current ideas and stigmas around mental health is a significant recent history of changing approaches in medicine and psychiatry. In the 1980s, American psychiatry announced that it was time to toss aside Freudian ideas of mental disorder because the true path to understanding and treating mental illness rested firmly in brain science, biochemistry, and drugs. Lots and lots of drugs. That's when the psychotherapy, the drug industry took off. This sudden call to revolution, however, was not driven by any scientific breakthroughs, nor was it as unprecedented as it seemed. Why had previous efforts stalled? Was this latest call really any different? In this book, the author offers the first comprehensive history of this troubled turn to biology to understand and overcome mental illness. She makes clear that this story is not just about laboratories and clinical trials, but also momentous public policies, acrid professional rivalries, cultural upheavals, grassroots activism, and profit-mongering. As the U.S. currently reckons with its own prescription drug crisis, the author traces a consistent thread of overpromising and frustrated hopes which led to the country's massive reliance on and subsequent abuse of drugs to treat mental illness. Above all, she helps us understand why psychiatry's biological problem is a crisis today. That's what she refers to it as, their biological problem. What needs to happen next, and why it is imperative that a new psychiatry embrace modesty rather than self-serving declarations of breakthroughs and revelations. So it sounds like this is going to be Firebrand, a Firebrand call to account of the psychiatry industry. And I would love to pick Juan's brain on the subject. I will read the book thoroughly, but and I'll read these two also back to back, because I have a feeling that they might reinforce each other, or maybe undercut each other in interesting ways. But that's what I mean by snapping my fingers and having people come over here for wine and calzones so that I'm not alone every night. But anyway, now I'll move on to two that I have not read, but they do intrigue me. One of them is an April book. I believe this is April. Yeah, this is April, and I've been meaning to get to this for a while now, and I haven't done it. This is by Jeremy Treglown, and it is Mr. Straight Arrow. It's about John Hershey and the author of Hiroshima, the slim, devastating account of the aftermath of the atomic bomb strike on Hiroshima. There was an entire issue of the New Yorker, and then was made into a book. And the book is amazing reading. I mean, it's I don't have any fears for it, because it's a standard item in schools. So I think it's probably immortal. But unlike a lot of standard items in schools, it's actually really good. Just an amazing reading experience. Just amazing. Take you an hour and a half to read, but you'll never forget it. And this is a biography of the author, and one of the only ones that I off the top of my head remember. I don't have a sheet for it, but yeah, the pub sheet, or the publicity material, refers to this as a monumental reevaluation of the author's life. Few are the books with an immediate impact as enduring as Hiroshima. That's absolutely true. First published as an entire issue of the New Yorker in 1946, it was serialized in newspapers the world over and has never gone out of print. I have a neat little hardcover that I got after giving away endless copies of it, just endless copies of it. By conveying plainly the experiences of 6 survivors of the 1945 atomic bombing and its aftermath, Hershey brought to life the magnitude of nuclear war. And in his adoption of novelistic techniques, he prefigured the conventions of new journalism. But how did he, who was not Japanese, nor an eyewitness, nor a scientist, come to be the first person to communicate the experience of to a global audience? In Mr. Straight Arrow, Jeremy Treglown answers that question and shows that Hiroshima was not an aberration, but was emblematic of the author's life work. By the time of Hiroshima's publication, Hershey was already a famed war writer and had won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. He continued to publish journalism of immediate and pressing moral concern. His reporting from the Freedom Summer and his expose of the Detroit riots resonate all too loudly today. Be nice if we had those in a Library of America. Is there a Library of America of this author? I don't think there is. Be nice if those other works, including, I'm a fan of some of his fiction. Anyway, but his obsessive doubts over the value of his work never ceased. In this book is an intimate, exacting study of the achievements and contradictions of his career, and I can't wait to read it. I don't know why I've put it off this long. And then the next one, the last of the ones that I haven't read yet, is going to strike you as familiar if you're obsessively watching my videos, and I assume you are. I assume you're obsessively watching everything I upload. It's going to seem familiar to you because we just recently saw a new book on this exact same subject. I don't mind at all. I'm happy to read back-to-back books on the same subject. I'd read 5 books on the same subject, just so I get a real sense of the subject. This is by Daniel Kennelfick, and it is No Shadow of a Doubt, the 1919 eclipse that confirmed Einstein's theory of relativity. So you know this is going to have that same guy that we've already met. Let's see here. Yes, he's mentioned in the first line of the pub sheet. This comes out at the end of April, the very end of April. In 1919, British scientists Arthur Eddington and Frank Dyson led extraordinary expeditions to Brazil and Africa to test Einstein's relativity. Their subsequent confirmation of his dramatic prediction that the path of light rays would be bent by gravity catapulted Einstein to global stardom because it had been a theory until then. Extremely well shored up with thought models, but not before tested. It made predictions. His theory made predictions about what space-time would do, about what relativity and space-time would do to observable effects. So if those observable effects weren't there, you would know there was a problem with Einstein's thinking, and it turned out there wasn't. Today, Einstein's theory is scientific fact, yet the quest to weigh light by measuring its gravitational deflection during the May 29th solar eclipse has since become clouded by myth and skepticism. The author provides definitive confirmation of these events through a combination of first-hand accounts and authoritative analysis to show how expedition scientists overcame war, bad weather, and equipment problems to test and confirm one of science's most fundamental theories. And we saw this already. We saw another book on this same subject that concentrated on Eddington. But it sounds like this is going to have other concentrations, but I'm all for it. And unlike that previous book, this book is by an Einstein expert, somebody who's written about Einstein quite a bit, and in a degree of wonkishness that just skirts being for professionalists. Which is just the kind I like. I'm perfectly happy. You know, sports fans always say the only sure way to improve your tennis game is to play with someone who's much better than you are. Same thing with books. For me, a popular historian taking on this 1919 eclipse and telling me a nice popular story about it, fine, I'm okay with that. But a specialist telling me that story, doing his best to slow down, but not always managing to slow down to my level, that makes me work harder and tends to be a very satisfying reading experience. So this is right on the docket. And then the last, we'll end this TBR torture with two books that I have already read. I recommend both of them. The first one is a debut. We may have seen it on this channel, but I had no idea how much I would like it. It's Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. Lovely cover in the finished copy. Can't really tell, but the letters are indented. It's a nice aesthetic effect. Let's see here. A literary courtroom thriller about an immigrant family and a young single mother accused of killing her autistic son. Miracle Creek is a powerhouse debut about how far we'll go to protect our families and our deepest secrets. In rural Miracle Creek, Virginia, Young and Pak Yu run an experimental medical treatment device called the Miracle Submarine. A pressurized oxygen chamber that patients enter for therapeutic dives. It's also a repository of hopes and dreams. The dream of a mom that her child can be like other kids, the dream of a young doctor desperate to cure his infertility and save his marriage, and the dream of the Yus themselves, Korean immigrants who have come to the United States so their teenage daughter can have a better life. When the oxygen chamber mysteriously explodes, killing 2 people, all these dreams shatter with it, and the ensuing murder trial uncovers unimaginable secrets and lies. In Middle Creek, Angie Kim takes a classic form, the courtroom drama, and draws on her own experiences as an immigrant, a lawyer, and the mother of a real-life submarine patient to turn it into something wholly original and unputdownable. Real. This is a spellbinding novel by an exciting new voice. All of which sounds like, cover jacket boilerplate, but boy oh boy, this author does a fantastic job. Just a fantastic job. This is one of those debut novels where if you're a crabby old professional like I am, you're crawling all over it looking for the things that debut novelists always do, the mistakes they always make, even the non-irritating kinds of mistakes that they always make. I'll be hornswoggled if I could find any of those. And oh my God, the courtroom parts, which I would have thought, I imagine if the author is very young, yes, she's extremely young. I would have thought that a millennial would look down on the idea of a courtroom drama, and therefore that their mockery, their sort of snide mockery of the form that they must consider part of the previous decade, the previous generation, would come through. But instead, the courtroom drama scenes are amazing. And also, this author has a it's a rare talent. I can't wait to see what her career unfolds like. I can't wait to read her next book. She has a rare talent of doing humor on the fly, if you know what I mean. We're not a comic novel, a very serious novel. But so often, debut novelists, especially young debut novelists, will be so consumed with the seriousness of their subject matter that they won't even catch the opportunity for glints of humor here and there, much less do them well. And this author, I'm not saying that she makes light of the story at all, but boy oh boy, when those moments happen, they work, they land. This is a real promising debut novel. So I highly recommend it. And then the next one I also recommend, it's YA. And it's by an author that I know BookTube has problems with. I have problems with it myself, but keep in mind, we always have to keep in mind, that we must separate the author from the book. And just look at the book, unless the book reflects the author's, the parts of the author that we don't like. But if the author manages to leave that at the door of the writing room, then you have to do that too. And the author is Orson Scott Card. And the book, I think, comes out in September. This is a while away. Yeah, this comes out in September, but I read it anyway. I read it in one gulp and loved it. I just loved it. I'll tell you all about it. It's Lost and Found. And that covers the opening scene of the novel. And it's a YA novel that comes out in September. Well, let me read you about it. It's about a young boy who has a micropower. I don't know that I've ever read Orson Scott Card YA before. Those of you who know this author, I'm assuming that we're not calling the Alvin Maker series YA. I automatically think of it that way because the first few novels in that series, a terrific series. In the first few novels, the protagonists are young, so I automatically just think of it that way. Plus, it's written in a kind of sing-song, folksy way that I don't know, maybe makes me think that, but I don't think that's YA, and I don't think that I've ever read Orson Scott Card YA if he's ever done it before. But in this book, in the Alvin Maker books, some of the characters have knacks, what are called knacks. In fact, most of the characters do. They have knacks, just these folksy, sort of low-key superpowers. Except for Alvin Maker, who is a maker with a capital M, which is the sum of all knacks. And in this book, it's not knacks, it's micropowers. Tiny little superpowers that don't really have much use, or at least initially they seem not to have much use. And our main character has a micropower. He can find the owners of missing items. But it hasn't done him any good. He's in high school. And this knack has never done him any good because the minute you return such a thing, a hair scrunchie or a beret or a lost device of some kind, to the person, they automatically assume you're the one who stole it. How else would you know to find them and accurately give it back to them? But anyway, let me tell you about here. Yeah, it's about a boy with a power to return lost objects to their owners who is put to the test when his best friend disappears. Are you really a thief? That's the question that has haunted 14-year-old Ezekiel Blast all his life. But he's not a thief. He just has a talent for finding things. Not a superpower, a micropower. Because what good is finding lost bicycles or hair scrunchies, especially when you return them to their owners and everyone thinks you must have stolen them in the first place? If only there were some way to use Ezekiel's micropower for good, to turn a curse into a blessing. His best friend, Beth, thinks there must be, and so does a police detective investigating the disappearance of a little girl. When tragedy strikes, it's up to Ezekiel to use his talent to find out what matters most. And Beth is special too, because she has a hormonal imbalance that means she's very small. You can see that on the cover, kinda. She's not actually a midget. She's just going to be very small for her whole life. And she is an amazingly frank and forthright character. Both of them are outcasts. And the book is just amazing. Sometimes I think this author can take one contract too many, and it shows in his prose. It tends to get a little lazy, a little bit just flat. But boy, when he's on, he's really on, as those of you will know, regardless of what we think of the author, as those of you will know who love Ender's Game, or the Alvin Maker books. The first 3 Alvin Maker books, I would be proud to put my name to them. They're amazing. And this is amazing too. And like the best YA, it can be read by anybody. I read it even though it's coming out in September. I'll read it again. When I get the hardcover, I'll read it again. But I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I find it hard to believe you wouldn't love it too. So there you go. That's a little Wednesday TBR torture. So we have Lost and Found by Orson Scott Card. Really good YA. Not an ounce of fat on its bones. Then we have Miracle Creek. A really good debut. Just does nothing wrong. It stakes out its territory, knows the story it wants to tell, does it just fine. There's one weak spot in one subplot. But other than that, I couldn't detect anything. And that weak spot could happen anywhere. Anybody could do that. There was a weak spot in one of the subplots of The Overstory by Richard Powers. There's a number of books under his belt by now. Then we have No Shadow of a Doubt, another book about the 1919 eclipse that was a once-in-a-lifetime experience to test Einstein's theory of relativity. We've seen one book on the subject, but I'm happy if there are more. 2019 is an anniversary year for that very, very nerdy event. Then we have Mr. Straight Arrow, a reconstruction of John Hersey's career and his work. Can't wait. Fantastic. Author biographies. And then 2 psychiatry books. The one is MindFixers, which sounds like it's going to make trouble. Sounds like it's going to throw a few rocks at the current state of psychiatry. And maybe you should talk to someone. Psychiatry memoir. That sounds like it'll be much more forgiving, much more round-edged, probably no less interesting. And that they're both going to make me wish that I could snap my fingers and have just one reader here to advise me on the technicalities, or maybe to take them off my hands and review them himself. Although, we'd only talk about books for a little while, I imagine. I think that probably after 10 o'clock, when we both had a skin full of wine, it would be all show tunes until wee small hours. One singing them well, and one not. But anyway, that's your TBR torture for today. I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.